how do you impact those around you? We talked about that a couple weeks ago, that you have an impact, but how does it actually work? What does it look like from the other side? How does it feel for those who love you? So today I'm having a conversation with my husband Jay about impact and confidence and mindset shifts that happen just naturally when you are living and learning with somebody else. Welcome to Explore Your Enthusiasm, episode 263, with me, Tara Swiger, and my husband, Jay Swiger.
Hello.
Hello. So episode 258, which came out just a few weeks ago, has ended up being super popular. So many of you have written, commented, shared it with your friends, and it is making me so happy. It was all about having an impact, and that the sacrifices you're making, another way to look at them is that you're having an impact on those around you. So it tells me, the popularity tells me that this way of reframing those sacrifices that you've made for your dream as a positive, because it's showing other people what's possible and it's inspiring them to dream bigger. This is something we all need to hear so much. We need to hear it over and over. I was talking about that with Jay, and through the years, he's told me many times that following my dreams and kind of the way I approach the world has, changed him. And so I asked if he would come and talk to y'all about it, give you a different perspective, just give you another boost of permission that, yes, you can approach it this way. Yes, it is okay for you to choose to follow after your dream because it's going to be positive for those around you. So thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
So let's start back. Even before we had the business, we always had slightly different takes on how we just thought about life and the world and how it works. So I was raised that you have to identify what you want and then you have to work hard after it. You are not going to get it unless you make it happen. And you were raised that as long as you are a good person and do the right things,
and you just do your best working at what you do.
Right. Everything will work out. Yeah. Which, we don't not believe that now, but the idea was you don't have to seek your fate. Your fate will come up to your door and say hello.
Yeah, as we've talked about between the two of us, it's more of a passive versus an active idea of how life happens to life occurs.
Right.
So in my old mindset, life is what happens to you, not what you make of it. And
right.
It's kind of, it's sitting back and letting things happen. I always use the example when it comes to watching TV. I'm a cable person. I will grab a remote, sit down, and whatever's on, that's the best option, I'll watch that. Whereas Tara is much more of a Netflix person where she's like, I want to watch something good. I will pick what I watch. And that's what I'm going to watch.
I will be the master of my watching fate.
Yes.
And cable, takes that power away from me. It's also partly that I'm controlling.
Yes, that's true.
But
it's a different perspective on right. the activity that we're partaking in. And the thing is, that's very reflective of our perspectives on life when we first got married.
So how has that, changed for you? Because you're not still... you still do watch cable that way.
Yes, I still watch TV like that. Drives Tara up the wall. But it's changed over time because when we first got married, that was just a rigid mindset in my head. It was like a brick wall that would not come down. And the longer we've been married and the more I've watched Tara have rewarding responses out of her life, well, I've struggled by just sitting back and waiting for things to happen to me. It started to kind of click with me, this isn't working. She's got the better results, and I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs now, So, for example, applying to jobs when we first got married, my methodology was you apply to one job, and you wait for them to call you back, and then after a week or two, well, then you apply to another job because the first job obviously isn't calling you back. Whereas Tara's philosophy was you apply to all the jobs.
On the first day, and then the second day you apply to all of those jobs. So, yes. You apply to 1 million jobs because you don't want to put all of your waiting eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Of might not get back to you.
Exactly. So, obviously, if Tara is applying to 144 jobs and I've applied to one, she's most likely going to get a call back before I am because I'm just sitting there doodling and waiting.
And I've always gotten a job within a week or two.
Yeah.
Of
Whereas it takes me forever.
when he's wanting to change jobs So, so like we talk a lot about it also being about like personal responsibility.
Yes.
Like instead of thinking like, I mean, you had personal responsibility to do the right thing, to be a good person, to always be loving and kind, but not to make dreams happen, or another word for dreams, like make what you wanted out of your life happen.
Yeah.
Whereas I've been very like, well, I want this. I don't see that it's just going to float towards me. And this is actually one of the reasons I'm an entrepreneur, is because I have a degree in French Lit and I'm basically unemployable. I mean, except for jobs I didn't want to have. And when I realized that if I let jobs just come to me, no one else would ever value, like with money, the way that I value my time.
Right.
And so if I worked for myself, I could decide, like it would be my own hard work that would make it happen. Right.
Right. This goes back to even in, like when I was in college, my roommate had a job and I had a job. And I worked hard, and just hoped that my boss would give me a raise because they saw that I was a hardworking person. My roommate would ask his boss for a raise and regularly get them because he's like, hey, here's the list of why I deserve a raise. His boss would be like, you're right. And I kept thinking, what a waste, man. Like, that's a horrible way of going about things. He's bragging about himself.
He's so aggressive.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible. I could never do that. That's so rude. And now I just look back and be like, that's pretty much how you have to go about it.
Right.
Right.
It
No
doesn't
one
have to
else
be
is
aggressive or rude.
is looking around to to see if you're worth what you're getting paid. Everybody is going to look around and be like, well, you're doing your job.
Well, and you'll settle for what I gave you. So until you won't settle for what I gave you anymore, I'm just going to give you that much.
Yeah.
And so it's just about taking personal responsibility. If you want something different, whether it's in your family life or your home life or your work life, you have to take it. You have to change something.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And so can you like point to what shifted that for you?
It wasn't one thing in particular.
Yeah.
It was a lot of things.
But when we were first married, we literally used to argue about it.
Yes.
And then over time, I was like, I'm just going to shut up because I'm right. And you don't need to fight when you're right. And then I remember actually we were in the Starbucks drive-thru one day when you said to me, because I like took a mental snapshot. I was so excited. You were like, I realize that I've just been letting things go with the flow. But if that's what I let happen, if I'm unhappy with what's flowing at me, more is just going to keep flowing at me. Like I could just go with the flow, but nothing will ever get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny though, because you've taught me, like the impact you've had on me is to like, when things are going good, go with the flow.
Right.
Like stop working. You don't have to paddle constantly.
No.
Once you're on the river you want to be on. Oh no, this metaphor is getting away from me. Okay. So I did sports metaphors in an upcoming episode. It's horrifying. So I had another question because we talked about, like in the podcast about impact, I talked about how the impact you have will give people permission to see it's possible to follow your own dream. So if, one of the listeners is building her craft business and somebody else in her life wants to start a bakery or something like completely random, like wants to run a marathon, just seeing you set aside time and work hard for your own vision will help other people realize they're allowed to do that too. So sometimes we get stuck in like communities of people or mindsets that's like, you should just be happy for what you've been given. You shouldn't try to make any changes, or you should just spend all of your time doing X. You should not also spend time doing Y, right? Like you shouldn't do a hobby. Like
right.
Some people think hobbies are stupid, or some people think all the time you have should be spent with your kids. And if you're a mom and you're saying, well, I want to spend these hours doing this other thing, or vice versa. Like all your time should be spent at work, and you're like, I actually want to work less and spend more time with my kids. Depends on like who's in your community, but just seeing you do it can inspire other people who want to do it differently. And so I wondered if you seeing me actually like work at making my dream first of being self-employed, which I made happen, and then hit certain sales goal, and then become our income, if that changed what you think is possible.
I would say it did. Because if you go back, way back almost 15 years ago, not quite, when we first got married.
It was 15 years ago
Yeah.
in August.
I know. But I'm like, when you first started doing Blonde Chicken Boutique, way back then, it started out, you started by working in a yarn shop in a farmer's market on a Saturday.
I know.
That was how it started. And I was like, well, that's cool. If that's what you want to do with your time, go ahead, do it. And then you're like, oh, hey, look, I'm going to dye some yarn. I was like, all right, cool. If that's what you want to do with your time, go ahead and do it. And the more you went, the more successful it was. And it wasn't like you talked to the boss about working in the yarn shop. You offered to dye the yarn for them. You bought all the supplies, went through all the stuff, and then you came to me and were like, hey, I think I can do this full time. And we moved.
Oh yeah, years later.
Yeah, we had moved here to Tennessee, and you were like, I think I can do this full time, and I can replace my salary at work with this. And I'd looked back at everything you'd already done and said, well, she's already been successful, so why not? If she thinks she can do it, I'd say she probably can. And every
Except
step
for that, you actually, in reality, were always way more encouraging of that. Like, that's probably what was going on.
That's going on in my head. Yes.
To me, you were like, you can absolutely do it, babe. You've already done this. You could totally do this.
Yeah.
I mean, with as
but
much
it's because
enthusiasm
every
as you
step
ever
of the
show.
way. It's not like you just instantly said, you know what, today I'm going to quit my day job and I'm going to start teaching people how to help their own business. No. Every step was a smaller step that built to something bigger.
That's true.
And so by the time that I was in a job where I wasn't really happy with things and I'm kind of feeling disenfranchised with everything that I was doing, I looked at you and were like, well, she could do everything she wanted to do. Why can't I? And I start to go back and look, and like all those steps were steps where you were active, taking what you wanted, little step by little step by little step. I think the only difference between the two of us and how we did things is just my end result required other people to be involved, and yours never did.
Well, and you're talking about buying
a comic shop, right?
Right.
That didn't work out, not because we didn't try or because we didn't work. It worked out because more people than just me and you were involved.
When my theory is that was one path we went down. That was one method to go down the path, but we're still going down the path.
Yeah.
We're just not to the end point yet.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I hold out hopes, but I'm not like clinging to any one thing in particular right now. I'm waiting until we have kids first. That's a big enough jump in all of itself.
Which is actually another example of like, it's a path we're going down, but it didn't happen the first methods we thought.
Precisely.
Right. So, the same thing to me for your comic book shop. Like, it'll happen. It'll just be a different method than we originally thought. And so, you're saying it was building like small, tiny steps, and they were all doable.
Say tiny, but it was like every step you took was a logical progression to the next level.
Right.
And every step you took was a jump, but it wasn't such a jump. Like, you didn't go from just dyeing yarn to teaching people. You went from dyeing yarn and selling it at farmers markets to like dyeing yarn and selling it online. And of course, you read voraciously, so you came up with all kinds of ideas and things all the time.
And then I sold yarn and quit my day job selling yarn.
Yes.
And then I got asked, how do you do that? And then I started answering people's questions.
And at no point were you ever like, I can't do that. Which is always my first response.
I always think I can't do it.
No, but I mean, like, it wasn't like, we'll say, every time somebody looks at me and asks, hey, you could do that. I'm like, yeah, no, I couldn't do that. That's too much. I could never do that. It's always the first response. And it's not a deflection of humility. It's a literal, like, lack of belief in my ability to do things. Whereas you, having the marine DNA that you do, you're like, well, I couldn't do that, but could I? And then you're like, well, let me go ahead and strategize and put it together and see if this is a real possibility. And you basically build out a plan for how you're going to do it.
Right.
And so that's like the thing that's really changed me over time.
Oh.
Is like I've seen that it's really a perspective. Like, it's the old saying that whether you say you can or can't do something, you're right. And that didn't really click with me until about 5 years ago, because I'd seen you actually do things that I never thought possible. Mm-hmm. And so, once I saw that, I was like, well, that is a fairly true statement, because if you'd asked me 5 years ago if Tara would have been where she's at now, based off of the business she was doing then, I'd have never believed it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny because in your story, I think two things we have to point out. One is that he said Marine DNA because my parents were Marines. What he was going to say is Weatherby traits,
yes,
because that's my maiden name, and that the Weatherbys are well known for being
they are can-do people.
Stubborn.
That's the rough end of it. The positive end of it
is my grandma says you're born to lead.
Exactly. That's the family motto right there. Weatherbys are born to lead.
It will be on our thing, on our family crest, if we were fancy enough to have one. Rural Vermonters don't have a family crest.
Rural Vermonters are not big on the family crest.
So,
they're too busy digging out of the snow.
So the other thing is that you said, like, if somebody came to you and said you could do this, you'd be like, no, I can't. But that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of, like, no one's ever going to come to you and tell you you should do your dream. And, like, I think when you said that, I was like, the thing is, nobody could have thought up what I do 10 years ago.
No.
When I quit my day job, or 14 years ago when I started my business in 2006. That was 13 years ago. Yeah, like, literally, like, Instagram didn't exist. And, like, it wasn't dreamable back then. And so I didn't have the confidence to do then what I do now.
Right.
Because the confidence grows with those little risks.
Right. Those simple steps.
And I think that might be what made you think it's doable, because you realized I don't have to feel like, okay, so when you started working at the comic book shop, and I was like, if you ever want to own one, you should go work there, because working there then built the confidence that you could run it.
Yeah.
But I would not have said, oh, you've been in social work for mentally disabled adults for years, I think you should open a shop. Right. Like, I'm not a big fan of the random jump.
Right.
Which is what gave you confidence to realize, like, we could do almost anything by, like, easing into it and building on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's very true. Like, I've worked in a comic book. I worked in a comic book shop for 3 years. I have no doubt that I could actually be fairly successful running a comic shop now. Like, that's a
because you did it. And you
did it,
more and more responsibility over time.
Exactly. And and nothing blew up. Nothing caught fire.
You did break a $700 statue. Was it really? It was more than $700.
It was $800.
Oh my god!
And it was on my birthday.
Don't come around Jay on his birthday. No. He has bad luck.
Horrible birthday luck. Whole life.
This is coming out after my birthday.
Yes, it is.
I wonder if my birthday gift will have gotten here.
Yes.
I don't believe you.
I was just going to say, like, your methodology is like it starts the freight train moving, right? Like, it's like the way you plan things out and set things up is like throwing the coal in the engine of the train. Like, that, you just keep throwing more coal in there every time you figure something out. Like, you look into something, every book you read, every idea that you start to think about and kind of, germinate on. It's
something that I said, you guys would have heard this in the birthday episode. I talked about, in episode 261, I talked about, I've never been a perfectionist. Like, my idea is always done is better than perfect. And when it comes to my business or putting stuff out there, like creating something, I'd rather put out there as best as I can make it in a certain amount of time, and then get feedback and then improve it. So that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Is like, then I hear from the actual people who are buying it, and I make it better, and I add to it, and I do Q&As around it, and then I fold in what I covered in the Q&A. Like, the Pay Yourself, I've been doing for... The class Pay Yourself I've been doing for 6 or 7 years, including teaching it live all over North Carolina, including teaching it in like 4 different versions online. And every time I update the online version, I include all of the questions that I've gotten before. And like, that's what's in the Starship program, by the way. If you join the Starship program, Pay Yourself is one of the first classes you do. And it's been updated literally over years, because if you feel like you have to get it perfect the first time, you're never going to release anything.
Mm-hmm. This is also another difference between us when we first got married.
Yeah.
I'll use an example. My cousin has a little boy. Fantastic kid. And we were hanging out with him recently, and they were doing watercolor painting. No guidelines, no rules whatsoever. Whatever you want to do.
It's a blank sheet of paper.
Just paint.
Watercolor it.
And he started painting, and then he made a mistake, and just went, "Oh no, it's ruined," and freaked out and cried. And we had to give him a whole new sheet of paper so he could start over again, which of course then ruined it again because in his mind he had something he wanted to put on paper.
Very specific.
Very specific ideas. And this is actually something I dealt with a lot when I was younger, is that I had very specific ideas. And if it didn't look like that right away, then it was not even worth the effort. So I wanted to, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist. And I used to draw based off of different comics that I'd read and things. Could never get the hands or the mouth right. And I didn't have anybody around me to tell me, hey, that's the hardest part of drawing humanity is hands and mouths.
And it's before the internet.
Exactly. So I just quit trying because I was like, I can't ever get this right. And it was 3 or 4 years ago, not 3 or 4 years later, that we went to a conference for comic shop owners, and I met the guy whose art I was drawing off of. And I was like, man, I used to to trace your stuff. I used to try to draw it myself. I could never get the hands or the mouths right. And he looked at me and was like, dude, neither can I. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could have been an artist if somebody would have just told me that when I was 11 years old.
Right. And like, I think part of that is personality, right? Like when you see it in a 4-year-old, I think he was 4, it's like innate personality, but then how does your environment and your parents build on that? Do they say, and this is actually the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. So you can encourage a growth mindset by saying, this is hard, and I understand you want to get it exactly right, but what if we took this mistake and we turned it into something else? And if he's not into that, say, then you can have as many sheets as you want, but just so you know, this is hard, but you can keep trying and you can get better. As opposed to you thought, if I can't do it, I'm not good.
Right.
And so that's it. And that's actually something else worth mentioning is that growth versus fixed mindset, I feel like is very contagious.
Yes, very much so. Because when I grew up with a fixed mindset. This is this, this is that. So when I was a kid, I was told I was smart. I believed it. I was smart. And then when I got into 6th grade, I ran into my first C that I ever got in my entire life. Everything went out the window. Wasn't smart anymore. I was just as normal as anybody else. I wasn't a smart guy.
And what happened after that?
And after that, I was pretty much a slacker until I met Tara.
Because he stopped working, because his concept, it was so fixed that you are smart. It's not that you are a hard worker or you could get good grades if you applied yourself.
Not that you do the homework.
Right. Not the actions you take, but the identity. And as soon as he lost that identity, he was no longer smart. He couldn't see a way back to being smart.
Right.
And we saw this with my little brothers too. It's really hard though, because I think that there's a stage of development where like that fixed mindset is really important for development, and like you have to help the kid grow out of that.
Right.
They're not naturally gonna see. Like my mom was just like hard work all the time, hard work. Anybody can do anything, and hard work. And so like because the focus was on that, then it was like, okay, yeah, I could hard work my way out of this.
Right. Yeah, so whereas for me, it was like, well, I'm not smart anymore. Guess I gave up on that. See what else comes along.
Good luck finding something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There goes my chance of going to Duke,
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for joining me on the podcast.
You're welcome.
To talk about the impact. And what I wanted to just encourage you guys is that I kind of felt weird about doing this because I didn't want it to be like, look at the amazing impact I have. But the fact is, anybody that you live with, that you are in contact with, your ideas and your concepts and your possibilities are contagious. A growth mindset is contagious. It spreads out, and other people realize like, oh, you're just working hard, I can see that. Or, oh, it's okay for you to follow your dream. And so just be assured that even if it takes 15 years, people are impacted by it all the time. And you get a choice. No matter what, here's the important thing. No matter what you're doing, you're impacting people with it. So if you are going around with a belief that you can't be your bright, shiny, glorious self because you need to stay small, you're telling other people that too. If you go around believing that you're either smart or you're not smart, you are impacting people with that belief as well. And if you are constantly telling people, you can't do that, that's not a real job. You can't do that, that's just a make-believe. You're making that impact. So you get to choose. What kind of impact do you want to have? Do you want to make the world a place full of possibility for different kind of people? Do you want to make a world where kids can work hard and do what they dream most of doing? With a lot of hard work. It's not magic. If that's the world you want to make, then you choose the impact you have. And what's great is you don't have to go preach about it. You don't have to be evangelists. You just need to decide to live your own life that way. And in living your life that way, you're going to have impact. So I just want to encourage you with that as we go into summer, and you're probably spending way more time with your loved ones now that it's summer. If you're not watching the video, you missed Jay's super excited smile to spend the summer with me. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I wish you a week full of inspiration and growth mindset, and I hope you have an enthusiastic week.